So I always knew I was just really bad at sleeping, but I didn't know how bad until I got this bad boy. This is a Whoop device. It's a sleep tracker, and it started showing me that my sleep was constantly in the red zone, and I was literally one of the I was literally one of the bottom 20% Whoop users in like my entire city. And I mean, it made sense because I was literally exhausted all the time. I was sleeping at 2 a.m., 4 a.m. every single day, just getting used to it. I still have COVID. 12 months later, I am in the top 10% of Whoop users. And that's a transformation that changed how I feel every single day. You know, I feel like myself again. I feel like I can enjoy doing things. I feel like I have the energy to work from 9 to 5. I have the energy to relax afterwards too. And that's crazy because, you know, believe it or not, I just never felt like that before. So here's my personal story of how I went from being a literal insomniac to being one of the top elite sleep users. What am I even talking? Sleep users. Okay. So here's my personal story of how I went from being one of the worst sleepers in all of society to becoming one of the sleeping elite. I promise you there's lessons here that you've probably never heard before because I never heard them before either. This is not just going to be a video with like obvious tips that you can find anywhere. This is my personal story, and I think there's unique things here that are going to be helpful for many people. Basically, ever since middle school, I've been sleeping at like 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 1 a.m., 12. There's no order in which I'm saying that, but you get the idea. I was sleeping really late, and this continued through middle school, high school, university, even when I was working for 2.5 years as a retail marketing consultant afterwards. And, you know, I was just kind of used to it. This is just how I existed, constantly exhausted, which was, you know, really hard to regulate my emotions. It was really hard to motivate myself to do anything. And I would also just wake up at like 12 a.m. But if I had to wake up for work at 9 a.m., I'd have to force myself to do that and then get like zero sleep. Okay, when I finally quit my job, I thought, okay, this is my chance to turn everything around. It's time to change my habits. And one of the main habits I wanted to work on was sleep because, I mean, it was obvious that it was just a huge problem in my life, right? So I ended up getting the Whoop. And I chose the Whoop because the top two sleep tracking devices were the Whoop or the Aura Ring. But I heard that the Aura Ring, like, it kind of sucks because if you're wearing a ring while you're working out, it's just pretty uncomfortable. And I don't really like wearing rings. So I ended up getting the Whoop because people said that they barely feel that they're wearing it. And I definitely found that to be true. It kind of just feels like it belongs on my wrist. I hate wearing watches because it feels uncomfortable, but I really don't mind wearing the Whoop. So the first thing it showed me is my sleep performance, which is like what percentage of the sleep I need did I actually get? And the answer was like not much. It was like in the red zone, like most nights. And the second thing it showed was sleep efficiency, which is like what percentage of my time in bed am I actually asleep? And that was also pretty bad. So that was my starting point. But the Whoop is going to be really useful because it showed me what impact different things I did actually had on my sleep. And it's really hard to tell because I'm literally unconscious, and how I feel in the morning can be, you know, wishy-washy. It's not exactly an exact science. So having the numerical support really helped with every step afterwards. To improve my sleep, there were two levers that I could pull. I could either increase the amount of time that I spent in bed, or I could increase my sleep efficiency. So I tried to do both, right? So let's talk about spending more time in bed first. Obviously, time in bed was a problem for me because if I'm sleeping at 1, 2, 3 a.m. and then I have to, you know, get up at a godly hour, then I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm just not putting enough hours in bed. So the first lever I tried to pull is just spending more time in bed, because if I'm sleeping at like, you know, 1, 2, 3 a.m., I'm obviously not spending enough time in bed. And that was my main problem. And I was trying to figure out, like, why am I sleeping so late? And it turns out there's something called revenge bedtime procrastination. So let's just read this definition together. Revenge bedtime procrastination occurs when individuals sacrifice their sleep for personal time. And I really like the phrase revenge because it's like getting back at the day for wronging me. You know, during the day, I would feel stressed. I would feel like I didn't get enough done. I didn't have enough fun. I wasn't satisfied or fulfilled or joyful enough during the day. And then at nighttime, I would try to make up for that with my form of procrastination, which at the time was basically video games or fantasy fiction. What I realized is that I was playing video games and reading fantasy fiction compulsively. It was at a different level than just watching Netflix or browsing YouTube or any of the other like random procrastination activities that I was doing. These things were on another level. Long story short, I realized I had to quit these two things. First, I quit video games, then realized nothing was changing and I was just reading fantasy fiction instead. So then I also had to quit reading fantasy fiction. And that was hard. Like both of these things were really hard to do. And if I didn't have the help of a support group for that, I don't think I would have been able to do it. And I immediately started to see the results of quitting these two things. I just, by default, without doing anything else, just started sleeping 1 or 2 hours earlier every single day. But even after quitting those things, I was still sleeping later than I wanted to. So now it was time to tackle the second half of revenge bedtime procrastination, which is making my day something that doesn't require revenge. And this meant increasing the joy that I had during the day and the fulfillment, but also reducing the stress. And guess what? Like, that's really hard, right? If I tell you like, oh, just, don't stress out as hard, just stress less, that doesn't work, obviously, right? I'm sure you've tried that before. And how did that turn out for you? So what I actually needed to do was to get help. And I threw absolutely everything I could think of at it. I tried life coaching, which worked really well. I tried therapy, which didn't work really well. Then I switched therapy modalities, and that worked much better. I tried all kinds of other help. And through working on it over time, I did actually reduce my stress, and I did figure out ways to have a more fulfilling life during the day. Like, it really helped that I changed careers, for example. But even beyond that, I had to figure out how to structure my time in this new career as a life coach. I stopped working after dinner. I started to find more things to do for fun that weren't just video games and like fantasy fiction, and things that were actually like truly fulfilling. And then over time, I got better and better at having days that I didn't want to take revenge over. And I started spending the time that I needed in bed. And the thing I really want to stress here is that this whole process takes time. There's no overnight solution to suddenly have great days, right? That's the work of a lifetime. And there's no overnight solution to quitting like some of your compulsive behaviors that you may be doing before bed. And I don't know if that applies to you, but it might. And you can message me for more details about that. All right, now let's talk about the second lever. Now I'm spending enough time in bed, but my efficiency was still low. And over the 12 months, you can see from this graph here that I increased my efficiency by an entire 10% on average. Is that a big deal? Yes, it's a big deal, because that means if I spend 10 hours in bed every single night, and if my efficiency increases by 10%, that means I get an entire extra hour of sleep without having to invest any extra time, because we're all strapped for time. What are the biggest things that help me get my efficiency up? Well, the number one thing by far was actually just making sure that there's complete darkness. Before, I was sleeping in this room where like my curtains were super thin, so the light would shine through even at nighttime just from the street lights. And then as soon as it hit 5 a.m., 6 a.m., the sun started coming out, like it was over. Like the light was so bright. And I didn't realize it was a problem because I was still unconscious, but the Whoop understood that my sleep efficiency was really going down as a result. The ideal solution, which I have going now, is that like back here in my bedroom, it's basically completely blackout. But if you can't make your room blackout, I really recommend getting a sleep mask. Like a sleep mask is what I was using before, and it had the exact same results as blacking out my room. It's kind of uncomfortable at first, but you're gonna get used to it. The other 5% of efficiency gain came from 3 things. 2 of them are kind of like obvious, but I just wasn't doing them before, and one of them was kind of silly. The 2 obvious things, number 1 was getting a better bed. I just had really crappy soft beds. I need a firmer bed. My partner likes a slightly softer bed. She sleeps on her side. I sleep on my back, but we both really like this extra firm memory foam mattress that we got from Jisk. Most people have never heard of Jisk, whatever, extra firm memory foam is my new favorite thing of all time. The second thing that was obvious is I just have this like chronic tailbone pain. I think it's something called sacroiliitis that's self-diagnosed based on WebMD, so I don't know if it's true. But I just was waking up in the middle of the night from pain. Even if I wasn't waking up, the pain was decreasing my sleep quality, so I just started doing physiotherapy on myself for that. And then the silly thing that I did, which actually works really well, is that I do this like crossword on pen and paper right before bed with my partner every night. And the reason why that works is because it actually calms the mind. And I got this idea because somebody told me that they were reading right before bed, and that made a big difference when they were tracking it with their Whoop. And sometimes I read, but really the crossword is something simple. It really takes my mind off. It really settles the mind. And having a settled mind for bed actually does make an efficiency difference. All right, so that's my entire story. And you can apply this to yourself. So hopefully you found this helpful. And if you did, like and subscribe if you want more stories from my personal development journey.